So we've been deeply involved in studying the question of what capabilities chief executives are going to really be needing in the future. And I think we've been finding some very interesting and provocative things. At Hay Group, we frequently work with firms to help them to identify the right next chief executive for their strategic challenges. And we also have done research in the past about what makes for a particularly outstanding chief executive in India and in China and in Western Europe and in North America. And in the course of all that work, we've now collected over 100 behavioral event interviews with chief executives from around the world and from many different industries. So we have a very wide sample. Now, behavioral event interviews are very interesting kinds of interviews. They're quite lengthy because what they do is ask leaders to describe an extremely challenging situation, both effective and ineffective ones where they really felt that they had achieved their purposes and some where they struggled. But the interview gets intense descriptive data about everything that leader felt and thought and did in the course of dealing with that challenge. And we use these interviews to code for competencies, to understand what it is that is in the abilities of that individual that contributed to their effectiveness. And so of these 100 or so interviews that we have of chief executives, we identified a small group of inarguably outstanding leaders. These were chief executives who, during their tenure in the role, very effectively led their companies to deal with their key strategic challenges, and they left the company in great shape when they moved out of the role. And so when the next chief executive came along, the firm was really very well positioned for the future. Then we asked the question, so what is it that these really outstanding chief executives, regardless of the fact that they're leading in different contexts, different strategies, different countries, different sectors, what is it that they have in common in their capabilities? And I want to talk about a couple of very intriguing things that we found. We found that regardless of where you are in the world, the outstanding chief executives had a very broad construal of whom they served. So who is it that the chief executive serves? What is the purpose of this organization? For the outstanding chief executives was never simply shareholder value. It's all about the shareholders. Instead, they thought about, of course, employees, of course, customers. Those tend to be groups that you have to marshal together in order to serve shareholder value. But they also thought about communities that they belong to. They thought about contributing to the industry. They thought about their role in the firm contributing to the well-being of the nation in many cases. And these are not chief executives who have changed their view of the role because there are a lot of challenges to the reputation of chief executives these days, and there are a lot of people who are very angry at the role of business in their current economic and environmental state. These are chief executives who were thinking about the role in this way all along, that they really have a very broad construal of who it is they serve. And the second thing about that broad way of thinking about the job is they've taken on a much more cognitively challenging task than a CEO that only thinks about shareholders. They're looking for strategies, for approaches, for ways of running the business that contribute to multiple constituencies simultaneously. So they're not thinking about trade-offs between what customers want and what impact we're going to have on the environment. They're thinking about strategies that actually contribute to the well-being of both of those constituencies at the same time. That's a much more challenging way to think about the job, but it also turns out to be a very creative space to operate. And I think it's very likely that given the increasing interdependence in the world, the increasing complexity of the jobs that chief executives face, the increasing demands from these different constituencies on organizations, we're going to see a lot higher need for these capabilities in all chief executives in the future.